those fears, while certainly understandable why I would have them, they did not come from God.
Mm.
And all of the details that I worried about finding a significant other and moving forward, God worked out all those details and all of the things that I thought, well, how will I work out this? How will I work out that? It all came together. It
Could
really
you give
did.
us an example of that?
Okay, so like with my work situation and my home situation, I knew that I didn't want to move. I did not want to move from my home with my family, and my elderly parents live across the street. And just there were certain specific circumstances to my life. And then I realized, well, I live in North Carolina in a very rural area. How in the world will I find a husband that wants to move out here? This has got to be a special person. But and this sounds really silly, but it is true. I had a little dog that my son, who lived with me at the time, when he was a teenager, he brought the little dog home, and the dog had some trauma. I'm a social worker. And so I kind of mothered the dog and mentored the dog. And so the dog became very protective of me.
Mm-hmm.
And the dog would not let anyone near me. And I just remember thinking, I won't even be able to have a gentleman come to pick me up for a date. I won't even be able to invite a friend to the house for dinner with this crazy little mutt. And God worked it all out. The dog still hates everybody, but the dog loves my husband. And
Crazy.
probably more than she does me, but I don't like to admit that. But I promise to be honest.
Welcome to the Forever Love Podcast. I am your host and Christ-centered relationship coach, Lily Matongwiza, and I am super excited about today's episode because I want to introduce you to one of my favorite superstar Ready for the One students. Now, I love all of my students, but Leigh-ann took the program when it first came out, when I first offered it, and she really dove into the material. She did the work, and she is now married. So she is here today to talk to us about some of the things that she has learned on her journey towards a Christ-centered marriage. She's here to offer all kinds of encouragement and inspiration to those of you who are still wondering, because what you're going to discover in today's conversation is that you have a lot of the same thoughts that she did and a lot of the same feelings, and that's totally okay. And you can work through them. So I don't want to talk too much. I want to let her really share her story. So without further ado, let's welcome Leigh-ann. So, good morning, Leigh-ann. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and dive right into the juicy stuff. And we want to know, how did all of this happen? Two-part question. How did this all come about? And what are you most proud of in yourself?
Okay, well, I took the Ready for the One course and participated. And at the time, I was not like desperate. I've got to find a husband. I was exploring, and I thought, regardless, this will be good for me. This is some good information. I may learn some things about myself. It could be helpful for me. I may even pass along some information, then I could help a friend because I had a lot of single friends. I was not really at the point where I thought, oh, this is going to help me find a husband. I just wasn't that far in the process. So when I took the course, it did help me learn a lot about myself. It helped me identify what it was I really wanted. I knew that it would be nice to have a companion. I was interested in having a companion, but I really dug in deep into the assignments and really put a lot of thought into it. So I feel like I honored my investment, and
Mm.
I did the time, and I put the work in, and I did some soul searching. And so I that is one thing that I would advise anyone to do, to really be authentic and give themselves completely to the process. Think about it, do all the exercises, because I mean, I know we're all busy, but I'm really proud that I took the leap of faith. I was single for a long time after a very, very hurtful divorce that I did not want. And so I had a lot of fears. And so I think I had to realize that those fears, while certainly understandable why I would have them, they did not come from God.
Mm.
And all of the details that I worried about finding a significant other and moving forward, God worked out all those details. And all of the things that I thought, well, how will I work out this? How will I work out that? It all came together. It
Could
really
you give
did.
us an example of that?
Okay, so like with my work situation and my home situation, I knew that I didn't want to move. I did not want to move from my home with my family, and my elderly parents live across the street. And just there were certain specific circumstances to my life. And then I realized, well, I live in North Carolina in a very rural area. How in the world will I find a husband that wants to move out here? This has got to be a special person. But and this sounds really silly, but it is true. I had a little dog that my son, who lived with me at the time, when he was a teenager, he brought the little dog home, and the dog had some trauma. I'm a social worker. And so I kind of mothered the dog and mentored the dog. And so the dog became very protective of me.
Mm-hmm.
And the dog would not let anyone near me. And I just remember thinking, I won't even be able to have a gentleman come to pick me up for a date. I won't even be able to invite a friend to the house for dinner with this crazy little mutt. And God worked it all out. The dog still hates everybody, but the dog loves my husband. And
Crazy.
probably more than she does me, but I don't like to admit that. But I promise to be honest.
I
And
love that.
so I'm just thinking, um, and this sounds silly, but it was one of the things I worried about. I have a furnished home. It's furnished with all of the things I like. It's and I'm thinking, well, what if I'm going to have to? There's this man who's obviously going to. I mean, I'm 48. I was 46 at the time. I mean, he's going to have stuff. How am I going to, this is just going to be a lot. And I realized, having been single for 10 years, it was going to be a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the way everything worked out, this is another example. My husband, his dad, a couple of years earlier, had open heart surgery. So he had really downsized and moved in with his dad to take care of his dad. And so he and his dad, some time had passed. He and his dad was getting better, and he and his dad had started looking for a home to buy. And they had gone to several places, and they hadn't really, it just, nothing ever worked out. They couldn't find the right situation, the right location, the right everything. And so it worked out. His dad was kind of ready for him to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And he was ready to move on, and he met me at the right time. So all those little details that I just couldn't figure out, how could God work all that out? Because that's just it did. Everything worked out, even down to the tiniest of details.
Yeah. And isn't that crazy? Because your brain
Right.
wanted to tell you
That there were
this is an
problems.
obstacle, this is a
Right.
problem. Yeah. And you have to solve it now.
Right. I was
Right.
trying to solve a problem before I ever met the man. That's silly. I mean, but that's how my brain works.
And not just yours, but I think everybody listening will be able to look at their own life story and see examples of how the impossible
Right.
managed to work out just fine. But those aren't kind of the memories we work from when we're projecting
Right.
forward. We're like, no, somehow I come up with solutions in the
And,
future.
and one of the things I think I had shared with you personally, one of the activities that I really enjoyed was, is it the life code? Is that the
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And when I also was selecting like 3 terms that I was really looking for in a significant other. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, any one of those terms would have been lovely. It would be, I mean, because they're all positive terms. So
Yeah.
it would be nice to find someone with any of those terms. But I picked 3 that really resonated in my spirit. And when I read those 3 words, I just felt a catch in my spirit, because it met the areas that I had been hurt in, and it met the areas that were sensitive for me. So the 3 that I selected, which is probably not the 3 that most people select, were gentleness, I think safety and security. And those I selected them. I haven't thought about them anymore since then. And I don't know, a couple of months ago, I was thinking about my husband, and I realized, you know, those are the 3 traits that he really has. And so I really did find someone with those characteristics. And I just remember really praying about finding a significant other, or just, a companion, a friend. Before I ever met him, just really praying about it. And I remember just praying specifically, Lord, I would like someone, and I gave my specific prayers, and one, I even got really specific at the end. And I was like, if he could be like a handyman or in construction or something like that, because I need some help around here. My dad is 82 years old. I've got to have some help. My sons are grown, and my husband owns a construction company.
That's amazing.
And, and so I say that, I mean, I know God is not Santa Claus, and some people don't like that mindset, but I would really say, be specific. You know what you need, and God knows what you need. And
Yeah.
if there's a little something extra out there, just pray about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that you kind of found that by looking at the core values first.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Because do you remember what you kind of assumed your husband, like way before you met him, when you were single and alone? Do you remember assuming what your husband would value?
Well, I was, yes, and it was wrong.
Yeah.
I was, assuming that it was all going to be about looks, and I was just so paranoid that I wouldn't be enough, and
Yeah.
I could not do online dating. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't have a problem with it. For me personally, because of the issues I have, I could not do online dating
Yeah.
because of the way it works. In general, where you meet someone on the internet and you talk a while, and then once you feel comfortable and you think, hey, this may be going somewhere, then you actually meet in person and that sort of thing. I just didn't feel like I could do that because of my insecurities about like looks and things like that. So God, he had to help me out a little bit. He had to send me a man in kind of a different way. So but I assumed it was all going to be about looks, and I just really had to, when I realized the way we met, some of my insecurities he's the perfect match for, and some of his insecurities and the things that he has been through, some negative experiences in his own history, I'm a good match for that. And so
Mm.
I don't want to talk about his issues because that's not cool. Um, but I'll just say because he's not here. But just some hurtful things he had been through in his life. My personality is a good match for that. I think that's the easy way to explain it.
And this is a message that I am always trying to share with women. So often we look at our bodies and we think that is what is going to matter most to him. And we look at all the problems with it. And we
Yes.
see the tummy and we see the arms
Yes.
and we see the whatever's going on. And we say, this is not good. Right? We make a judgment about it. And we use that to disqualify ourselves from being able to have a good partner, because we're like, the thing that the man is going to value, I don't have.
Right.
But the reality is
that's not how it is.
It isn't at all. The reality is that he is going to love you because of the things you do have, the values you have, and they're going to be very different from your body. Like,
right.
And this is why I'm always talking about, yes, you want to be with somebody who you are physically attracted to. There's a part of the relationship. Yeah, definitely. But don't assume that that's what it's all about for him, and know
Correct.
that like there's a good partner knows that a woman has a body that wrinkles, and and so does he, and they work with that reality rather than arguing against it. And it's a sign of maturity that you want to have in your relationship.
And I had to realize we're both in our late 40s. He's realistic. Right? And he's got his own hang-ups.
Yeah.
So yeah. I was just letting too many thoughts from the enemy come into my mind that I would never find anyone, and I would always be insecure, and just all this silliness that was just bringing me down and preventing me from meeting the right person. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I had to do a lot of forgiveness, just internal forgiveness in regards to my previous marriage and in regards to my past, in order to be ready to meet the right person. It should not have taken me as long as it did, bottom line. But here we are. So it did take me a while to get there.
Well, what took time and what helped you move through it?
Honestly, part of it, I do think, was the course. And just realize, and you did not ask me to say that. I'm just being honest. We didn't talk about that. I think just accepting that, because one situation was not a good situation, it does not mean that there's anything wrong with me. It's a God-given desire to have a partner, to be loved, to love another person, to walk in companionship with someone. There's nothing wrong with me. I have strengths. I have areas for improvement, just like every other human being on the earth. And there will be someone, I had to just accept and believe, there will be someone that loves me for my strengths, but also can appreciate my areas for improvement, either work with me on them or understand them, overlook them, or a combination of both. And so just being able to accept that there is such a person out there.
Do you like that your husband has areas in which your strengths can be appreciated?
Yes. And I did not feel that way in my previous relationship. I'm trying to be very respectful, but I'll just say that I did not feel that I had that previously.
Yeah. And I think that's something we don't anticipate, that the other person will actually like meeting our needs, and that will like meeting the needs of the other person when we have those strengths. And we recognize like, hey, I actually can help in this capacity, and I'm going to need your help in that capacity.
Right. And I prayed, God, send me someone that can be a help to me, and send me someone that I can be a help to them. And when I prayed it, I remember thinking, well, how could I even be I couldn't even think of a way in which I could be a help. But I have seen that with my husband this is an easy example, and he wouldn't have an issue with me sharing this. For example, he did not grow up in the church. He is a Christian, I would not have married him if he was not, but he does not have that long history of being raised that way. And so there's a lot of things that he doesn't understand, and he likes to ask questions. We like to study. Just so he appreciates that he has someone to talk to about the faith. His
Mm-hmm.
ex-wife was of a different faith. And so it is enjoyable to him to have someone to go to church with him, to have someone to pray with him, and someone that can believe for him, and get involved in ministry and that sort of thing. And so
Yeah.
to him, that's a tremendous blessing. And I didn't even think about that.
And does that, do you still feel like you're equally yoked with him?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you explain how that is? Because I think some women kind of get the idea that like the man has to be the stronger in the faith, that they're going to be leading it, like for a man to fulfill his role, that he's got to be the one with the more experience and all that stuff. So could you share how it's working for you?
Well, my husband is a Christian, and he was a Christian before I met him, but he did not have a lot of Christian support. He hadn't
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of involvement in the Christian community. And so there was just some things that he had a lot of questions about. And
Yeah.
so now we spent some time trying to find the right church. And now he feels like he's in the right Christian community. And
Nice.
so he's been a Christian the entire time. Ever since we met, we've been able to pray together and go to church together and get involved in ministry together. But it's more about the background knowledge. He just didn't
Mm-hmm.
have that. But the beauty that brings to it is he has a very childlike faith.
Ah, beautiful.
His faith is amazing. His faith is so strong. And so that's refreshing to me, to see someone who, I probably went to Sunday school when I was a week old, literally. And
Yeah.
so it's refreshing to me to see someone who was not raised that way. He was for a little period of time when he lived with his grandmother as a child. And so I think that
Okay.
little seed was planted. And so it's refreshing to me to see someone who wants to learn more and is excited about learning more. And so I think that makes us a good match.
Yeah, I love that for you. Can you tell us what one of the biggest misconceptions you had about what marriage would be like, that you had to like kind of face and overcome?
So I have been married before. I
Mm-hmm.
was my ex-husband and I lived together 16 years and were officially married 17 years. So I knew a lot about marriage. I think I just assumed that everything I knew about marriage, that my second marriage would be the same way. And so I had to really accept that this is a new thing. God is doing a new thing in my life, and there's some things that are just going to be different. Now, obviously, there are some things about marriage that we just all know. There's compromise, there's give and take, there's, working it out, communication. You don't agree to do something. Yeah, we'll do that. No, you talk about it with your spouse. So there's some things that I already knew, and they're just universal.
Yeah.
You got to talk about money. You got to talk about, you can't just go buy a new car, things like that. That's just across the board. But there's just new aspects of this relationship that are so very different. And so, on the one hand, I had to get used to being married again. I had been single for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to get used to sharing decisions, and I had to get used to more of the compromise. And so that was a transition. And then I had to get used to the ways that this marriage is going to be very different from my previous marriage, and to not just assume that when he says whatever, he means this, and not just assume that I brought some issues from the past that in the first couple of months we were married, I had to kind of get it out of my system. And
Yeah,
I
I
think
get
we're
that.
over that hurdle now. We're good.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did that look like for you when you were trying to like, where do you think that was coming from?
Oh, I definitely know where it was coming from. I just think that like I assumed what he was thinking, or I assumed his intentions because I was comparing him to another person, and I assumed that this is what he meant, and so I had to just kind of get that out of my system and learn. Oh, he's this take it at face value, and
Yeah.
don't read so much into everything, you know. So I just had
So,
to I had to retrain my brain. I'm a
okay.
social worker, and we kind of talk about that. So I guess that's the right term. I had to retrain my brain.
And could you share a little bit about what that process looked like for you specifically?
I think the most important thing was just seeing my husband's consistency and just understanding his character more day after day after day. And really, I think it was just time, just kind of getting settled, settling in. And after time, all that stuff just kind of melted away.
So, what were you kind of saying to yourself along the way that was helping you to retrain your brain? And like, what were the thoughts you were intentionally adopting?
I just had to, I have to think about this. So I got to think. I think I had to think about my husband's character and remind myself um, about his intentions and his love for
Mhm.
me. And that um, I think I just had a lot of fears of abandonment and fears of one day he's just going to get tired of me. And just I had to realize that some of my thoughts were coming from a place of negativity, coming from a place of fear based anxiety, coming from the past. And that just had no place in our relationship.
Right.
And so I just had to spend some time realizing where it was coming from and that it
Right.
was fear based.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes we assume that we're going to, like, it's going to be obvious to our brains that it's a different person and we
Right.
don't have to worry about the same problems with this new person. But
Right.
the reality doesn't seem to translate to the brain so naturally. And so
Right.
it does have to be pretty intentional for a little while. Like it does get easier, but there is a point in the relationship where we have to be quite intentional about reminding ourselves, like, this is a different person. They're interpreting things differently.
Right.
They're coming from a
Right.
whole different background. They're not making the assumption that I think is happening here.
Right.
So, did that require a lot of extra communication? Like, is that something you were doing internally, or was this something you were actively discussing with him?
I think most of it was internally, but we did have some conversations about that. And I think it was patience on his part and a lot of reassurance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And coupled that with just time and seeing his consistency. And I don't know, it just kind of went away.
Yeah, well, it makes sense from like my perspective. What I would tell other people is happening here is that you're gathering evidence. Like when
Right.
we go into the relationship, we have to kind of give ourselves a new hypothesis, right?
Right.
Like, I believe this person is different, but we don't exactly have evidence for that yet. So
Right.
as we're in the relationship, we start collecting that evidence and we build up our confidence in that person and our hypothesis that this is different. And that's
Right.
kind of how this brain kind of turns the switch and says, like, okay, I'm on board with this now.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if I could give advice to
Yeah.
women out there who are considering the program, in the program, just praying about their future and their desire for a significant other, their desire to be married. I did have to just let a lot of preconceived notions go. And so I just really prayed for God to show me some things, to, if there are ways that I need to change me. This is before I ever met my husband. If there are things that I need to work on, I show them to me, reveal them to me. I really put the time into that. And so there were some things that God showed me that just were helpful to me, even if I never met another significant other. And so I did some of the work. And one of the things I think was my overemphasis on what other people think.
Yeah.
My overemphasis on what it's going to look like and knowing how it's all going to play out and planning it out and all the details. I had to let some of that go. And that is a step of faith. And so I had a dream before I met my husband, and I was getting married. And this sounds very silly, but in the dream, I'm at the altar and I'm like, oh, I'm getting married. Who is this guy? And I know that's a silly dream, but it's what happened. And so and so he turned his face to me. It was not my husband's face. I had never met him before, but I looked at the person and I was like, oh, he's younger than me. Oh. And then I was thinking, well, where did I meet this guy? And then something said to me, a knowing in the dream, he goes to your church, but you haven't met him. I was like, oh. And then he just looked at me and I saw these green eyes, the deepest green eyes. And I woke up. And so I really prayed about it and I was like, what is that all about? What a weird dream, Lord. And I just, the thing that I prayed about it, and I had some friends who are very spiritually mature help me pray about it, and they agreed with me. They gave me confirmation that these are the things that I got from the dream, that when it happens I will know, and when it happens it will happen quickly, because I was just getting married. Who is this guy? And it was just silly, but and that I can't just assume what he's going to look like. I can't have this preconceived notion about what he's going to look like. And so that is what I took away from the dream. And it is all correct. So my husband did attend. He had been attending the church that I was going to at that time. So large church. But that was during the pandemic. And because of taking care of his elderly parents, he was not going in person. He was watching online with his dad. And so he did go to my church, and he is younger than me, and he does have the prettiest green eyes you ever saw. And so it was a prophetic dream. But my husband, I am very attracted to him. I do find him to be very handsome, but he does look different from what is my typical aesthetic. My husband has a lot of tattoos. And so I had to kind of get used to how some people react to that. I'm from a very conservative area. I go to a very conservative church, have a very conservative family. So I had to let go some of my preconceived notions about what he was going to look like, and preconceived notions about what other people were going to think.
Yeah.
And we did have some issues with that. Let me reset. We did not have any issues between us about that. We don't have any issues with that at all. We had some outside people have issues with that.
Right.
And so I just think kind of the dream was sort of preparing me for that. And I had to realize how much this man loves me. This is what I prayed for. And I specifically prayed, God, send me the man that can help me fulfill the ministry call you have put on my life. Because there are some men that would maybe be intimidated. There are some men that would maybe be, jealous is a strong word, annoyed by the time that I put into certain things, or just, would want me to focus only on them. And so God did send me someone that he's like my hype man. He's like my cheerleader.
That's awesome.
He's all about it.
Awesome. That's so exciting. And I love that because you're right. We have so many preconceived notions.
Right.
And I know that when there's going to be a few of you out there who are listening to this and being like, if you had that kind of prophetic dream, would you interpret it as like, gotta focus on green eyes, looking for green eyes, looking for green
Right.
eyes?
Yeah. You can't just, I was not walking around looking at every green-eyed man.
Yeah, like scanning the church, because
Yeah.
that's not how it's going to work. Because sometimes
No.
we do receive those prophetic messages, but we get in our own way because we're focusing on the wrong message, right? And so I love that you were able to get that that feedback from women who are around you to support you in understanding that, and that you were able to take away the interpretation that you did and see it be fulfilled so beautifully. Because I suspect if you had focused on like, he's going to be younger than me and he's going to have green eyes,
Yeah, I'd have been like
looking
for some 22-year-old or something.
Exactly.
He's just a couple of years younger than me. Don't get excited.
And I also wanted to share, like, I really understand where you're coming at with the tattoo thing, because I have a couple of tattoos, and in my husband's culture, it's a more conservative culture in general. So tattoos are like, what? Why? And it wasn't a problem between the two of us, but in my own mind, sometimes I made it a problem because I was always wondering what the people who he cares about, like his parents or, you know, people at church, are going to think of him having a wife with tattoos. And dealing
making
with
an issue where there's not one.
Exactly. And it is in adopting the mind of Christ and recognizing like, oh, these are the stories I'm telling myself, and I don't have to believe them, that we get that freedom from them. And there was something you said a little while back where you talked about like focusing on that gap between having the thoughts and feelings and reacting to them. And just being able to slow it down and respond in a way that is in alignment with what you really want and what is good, rather than that reaction that would have been so easy to fall into.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought about that I wanted to make sure that I mention is some of the resources in the materials and in the curriculum. I specifically remember like the finances and the financial things as you're preparing to get married. I did show them to my husband, and I remember he was like, "This is great. This is good. We need to talk about it. Everybody should do this before we get married." And so he actually he appreciated them as well. And so we had some great conversations, and we found out that we were pretty much on board and on the same page. So that was good.
Yeah. Did any surprises come up for you?
I think they were pleasant surprises.
Oh, nice.
To that was good.
Yeah, I don't think sometimes we get really nervous around like these kinds of conversations, because in the course there are in-depth conversations. I think I have about 100 questions for you and your spouse to discuss before you get married. And a lot of us are afraid of what we're going to hear, but the reality is we're often very pleasantly surprised.
Yes. We both had similar mindsets. We had both made some similar financial mistakes, and we had both made some similar financial turnarounds, as in changing of mindsets as we got older. And so we both pretty much had the same mindset on saving, and the same mindset on getting out of debt, and the same mindset on, you know, not using credit cards and things of that sort. I was very pleasantly surprised of how similar we were.
Yeah. So to wrap things up here, If
Okay.
you had to choose one word to kind of describe where you were at emotionally, spiritually, mentally at the beginning of your journey towards marriage and where you are now, what two words would you use for the beginning and now?
Well, for the beginning, I'm going to use two words instead of one. I was a mess. I had a lot of emotional baggage, a lot of fears, worries, insecurities. It was bad. I'll just be honest. It was bad. And so now the word that I would use is heal.
Healed. That's
Now, am
beautiful.
I walking around A1 every day? Of course not. Yes. But there have been so many issues and concerns and worries and fears that I have just been able to put aside.
Yeah.
And I do think that God has done a healing, but I had to go through some stretching. I had to go through some growth. I had to take some leaps of faith. I had to let some things go, not worry about some things. I had to not worry about what people think. That was a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that all of that contributed to what I would say is heat.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if there's a woman out there who's like you and she's thinking about investing in Ready for the One, and she has the resources because it is a bit of an investment. And if she has the resource to be able to do it, but she's wondering whether she should, what would you say to her?
I would I would just tell her what I did. I thought about it, I prayed about it, and I realized I'm just going to sow this as a seed because I honestly, I mean, I was a single mom. I did not have the full amount of the resources. I had to set up a payment plan. But I realized, you know what? I'm going to invest in this. I'm going to invest in myself. I am going to just sow this money as a seed. If nothing else, and I honestly did not consider for a moment that I was going to just get a husband. And that just was not where I was at.
Yeah.
I just realized I had some work I needed to do. I had a lot of hurt. I had fears, anxieties. I had a lot of baggage, and there was just some work I needed to do. And I also said, you know what? I've got a lot of single friends that are my age, give or take 5 or 10 years. If nothing else, I'll be able to help them share some of the things I've learned. I might even do a single ladies Bible study one day. I don't know. Something good is going to come out of this, and I'm just going to sow it as a seed and make the payments and cut back on some other things. So even if I hadn't met my husband, I think it would have been good for me because it helped me to define what I wanted, what my goals were, what my needs were, my areas of improvement. And it was just good for me, the whole process.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
You're
I
welcome.
really love what you took away from the program and what you did with it, because it's one thing to acquire the information and it's another thing to put it into practice. And I just want to acknowledge and celebrate the work you did to get here and
Thank you.
create this beautiful relationship that you're enjoying now. And just thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. It has been a blessing, and thank you for the sacrifices of time and I'm sure financial sacrifices that you made in order to get everything started and the hard work that you put in, because I don't think that I would be married today had I not gone through the program. I'll just be honest. I'm not saying that as a commercial. You didn't ask me to say that. That's just coming out of my heart that I don't think I would be there had I not gone through that process.
Thank you. It means a lot to me for that you would say that, and I appreciate it.
So and I don't want everyone to think that, a knight in shining armor rode in on a white horse. I mean, we were both single for 10 years, We
Mm.
had to get used to living with another person. We had to have conversations. We had to have communication. But at the end of the day, every single day, and we have been married now 18 months. And, I didn't want to do this too soon. You can't
Yeah.
just do this after 1 month.
No.
We have been married 18 months, and every single day at the end of the day, I'm so glad we're together.
Well, congratulations. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank
your
you.
journey with us today. It has been a blessing to hear your feedback and to check in with you and hear how you're doing. So just thank you so much for being here, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Wow, what an incredible testimony of what happens when we learn how to put God first, take action, fueled by the fruit of the Holy Spirit, and build on a foundation of love. If you are curious about anything you've heard here today, whether it's adopting the mind of Christ or going through coaching, learning how to rethink, retrain your brain to be in alignment with the will of God, I want to invite you to our free group coaching Friday meetups. It is an incredible opportunity where you get to meet with me live in a Zoom room, and I do a little bit of coaching, I do a little bit of teaching. It can be a bit of a mixed bag, but it is an incredible group of women who are committed to this journey, who are committed to honoring their God-given desire for love, and who want to learn how to do it in a way that feels fulfilling, authentic, kind, generous, and gentle with themselves. So if you want to participate, you need to make sure that you are subscribed to the email list so that you'll get an invitation. Go over to proverbs2426.com/subscribe to get on the email list, and you will get an invitation to our next group coaching call. They are always on Fridays. They're usually at 1 p.m. Eastern, and I want you to be there because there's just so much richness and goodness. Head over to proverbs2426.com/subscribe to make sure you get your invitation. Until next week, God bless you.